Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Blog Podcast. Today is Monday, September 10th, 2018. A lot to get to today. Week 1 recap from yesterday. Look ahead to tonight's 2 games a little bit. Go over some of the key injuries of Week 1 and all the other great moments. Do some baseball, go over yesterday's results, look ahead to tonight's games, power rankings, players of the week. Then I'll talk about the U.S. Open, men's final, the BMW Championship in golf, WNBA Finals Game 2, an NHL trade that happened at 1 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time last night, which surprised me, to say the least. And then I'll do college football at the end, go over the New A people, do my weekly power rankings, and I'll do guest the lines for Week 3. Alrighty. Yesterday's football slate. The Jaguars defeated the Giants 20-15. The story of this game to me was how the Jacksonville defense pretty much led the way for them. Miles Jack had the pick 6 off of Eli Manning, who threw for 224 yards, 23 of 37. Blake Bortles wasn't great either. I thought Manning played better than Bortles, believe it or not. 18 of 33, 176 yards, a touchdown pass, and a pick. Manning did miss some throws to Beckham, and he missed Beckham and Barkley open a couple times. Evan Ingram kept dropping passes. I think Barkley, other than the 68-yard run, which was special and was so great to see, he just kept getting 1-yard carries, and I think that's a thing to note. The Giants' offensive line still isn't great. Eric Flowers had a debacle of a game. Eric Flowers just kept getting penalties in the first quarter that set the Giants' offense back. Had some plays called back because of him. Nate Solder wasn't great in his Giants debut either. First quarter, Josh Lamb field goal. Aldrich Rojas field goal, 3-3 after 1. Second quarter, another Lamb field goal, 6-3. Yeldon from Bortles, 1 yard, 13-3. Rosas field goal, 13-6 at halftime. Rosas, another field goal on the first drive of the third quarter by the Giants. Made it a 13-9 ball game. Fourth quarter, Miles Jack's pick 6, 29 Jags. Then a little over a minute later, Saquon Barkley, 68-yard run. Shown why many people believe that he is the favorite for the Offensive Rookie of the Year award. Giants fail on the 2-point conversion run. 2015 was your final in that game. Jacksonville next week hosts the Patriots. The Giants take on the hapless Dallas Cowboys. Hapless might be being kind to describe the Cowboys' Week 1 performance. We'll get to them in a second. Who was hapless? The Buffalo Bills, who fall to the Ravens 47-3. Ouch. The Bills might be the worst team in football. Nate Peterman was terrible. 5 for 18, 24 yards, 2 picks. Josh Allen came in 6 for 15, 74 yards. There's nothing nice to say about the Bills here. Joe Flacco, 25 for 34, 236 yards, 3 touchdowns. Lamar Jackson came in at the end when the game was out of reach, 1 for 4, 24 yards. The Ravens travel to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals next week as the Bills host the Los Angeles Chargers. The Buccaneers were by far the biggest surprise of Week 1. 48-40 winners over the New Orleans Saints. Ryan Fitzpatrick, 21 of 28, 417 yards, 4 touchdowns. Drew Brees in defeat, 37 for 45, 439 yards, 3 touchdowns. The Saints defense was horrendous in this game. But the Saints got on the board first on a 5-yard run by Alvin Kamara, 7-0. Deshaun Jackson, 58-yarder from Ryan Fitzpatrick, ties up at 7 apiece. Will Lutz field goal, 10-7 Saints. Fitzpatrick rushing touchdown, 14-10 Bucks. Second quarter, Brees again for 28 yards, 17-14 Saints. Chandler Catanzaro ties up at 17 apiece on a field goal. Fitzpatrick to Chris Goodwin, 24-17 Bucks. Justin Evans, 34-yard fumble return for touchdown, 31-17 Bucks. Breeze to Thomas, 6 yards, 31-24. That's at halftime. The over hit at halftime of this game, which is unbelievable. Third quarter, Bucks pull away a little bit. Cannizzaro field goal, 34-24. Fitzpatrick to Evans, 50 yards, 41-24 Bucks. Fourth quarter, Fitzpatrick to Jackson, 36 yards, 48-24 Bucks. Here come the Saints. 1 yard Kamara run, 48-32. They complete the 2-point conversion for a Kamara run. Breeze to Kamara, touchdown. Breeze to Ginn Jr., 2-point conversion, 48-40, your final. And I forgot to go over the scoring in that Ravens beatdown of the Bills. First quarter, Alex Collins, 8-yard run, 7-0 Baltimore. Flacco to John Brown, 14-0 Baltimore. 2 Justin Tucker field goals in the second quarter made it 20-0. Crabtree from Flacco, 12 yards, 26-0, 2-point conversion, pass failed. Third quarter, Flacco to Snead, 13 yards, 33-0 Ravens. Jaravius Allen, 1-yard run, 40-0 Ravens. Stephen Hoska got the Bills on the board in the third quarter, 40-3. Fourth quarter, Kenneth Dixon, 2-yard run, 47-3 was the final there. The Patriots defeated the Texans 27-20. Applause to myself for correctly getting this score correct. I rarely ever do that, predicting a correct football score, but here I had it. Tom Brady, typical Tom Brady game, 26-39, 277 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick. Deshaun Watson, 17 for 34, 176 yards, a touchdown and the pick. Watson looked a little rusty, give him some time. First quarter, Brady to Gronk, 21 yards, 7-0 Pats. Texans get on the board on a field goal by Kaimi Fairbairn, 42-yarder. Second quarter, Brady to James White, 12 yards, 14-3. Fairbairn field goal, 36 yards, 14-6. Brady to Philip Dorsett with 14 seconds left in the half, 4 yards, 21-6 Pats. Third quarter, Gostkowski field goal, 24-6. Texans get their first touchdown on a Alfred Blue 1-yard run, 24-13. Fourth quarter, Gostkowski field goal, 27-13. And Bruce Ellington, 5 yards from Watson with 2:08 to go to make it an interesting game. 27-20 was your final. The Vikings defeated the 49ers 24-16. Kirk Cousins had a solid debut for the Vikings, 20 of 36, 244 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jimmy Garoppolo was disappointing on the flip side. His first career loss as a starting quarterback. 15 of 33, 261 yards, a touchdown, and 3 picks. First quarter, Daniel Carlson field goal, 48 yards, 3-0 Vikes. Second quarter, Cousins to Stephon Diggs, 22 yards, 10-0 Vikes. Robbie Gould field goal, 10-3. Third quarter, Mike Hughes, pick 6 in his first NFL game, 17-3 Vikes. Robbie Gould field goal, 17-6. Cousins to Rudolph for 11 yards, 24-6. Garoppolo to Dante Pittis, 22 yards, 24-13. Fourth quarter, Robbie Gould field goal, 22-yarder to get the Niners within 8, but the Vikes hold on and they get the cover as well. And what was one of the more surprising results, but courtesy of Marcus Mariota being injured and some lightning delays, the Dolphins defeat the Titans 27-20. I can't overreact to this game from a Dolphins standpoint because the Titans have injuries all over the place. Ryan Tannehill, 20 of 28, 230 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks. Mariota, as I mentioned, was hurt, but his stat line wasn't good. 9 of 16, 103 yards, 2 interceptions. Blaine Gabbert, 11 of 22, 117 yards, and an interception. Disappointing first game for the Tennessee Titans, in my opinion. Rain delays aside. First quarter, Titans get on a board on a field goal by Ryan Suckup, 3-0 Titans. Second quarter, Tannehill to Kenny Stills, 10 yards, 7-3 Dolphins. Third quarter, Jason Saunders, 27-yard field goal, 10-3 Dolphins. Fourth quarter, 4-yard touchdown run, Deion Lewis, 10-10. Jakeem Grant, 102-yard kickoff return for touchdown, 17-10 Dolphins. Tannehill to Still, 75 yards, 24-10. Titans answer back with a 94-yard kickoff return by Darius Jennings, 24-17. Jason Sanders field goal, 27-17. Ryan Suckup, 53-yard field goal with 11 seconds left of the game, made it a 27-20 game. And speaking of the Titans, Delaney Walker out for the year with a broken ankle. And that is a big loss for the Titans. That is Mariota's favorite red zone target. He's out. Mariota's injured as well. And Taylor Lewan hurt as well. Boy, the Titans might be headed for a disappointing season under new head coach Mike Vrabel. The Bengals defeated the Colts 34-23. Good comeback win for Cincinnati. Colts had the lead for a lot of the game. Bengals come back and win. Andy Dalton, 21 of 28, 243 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Andrew Luck, 39 of 53, 319 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Bengals actually on the board first on a field goal by Randy Bullock, 3-0 Bengals. Adam Vinatieri, field goal, 3-3. Second quarter, Luck to Eric Ebron, 26 yards, 10-3 Colts. Adam Vinatieri, field goal, 13-3 Colts. Dalton to John Ross, 3 yards, 13-10. Adam Vinatieri, field goal, 16-10 Colts. Third quarter, Luck to T.Y. Hilton, 5 yards, 23-10 Colts. From here on in, the Bengals take over. Dalton to A.J. Green, 38 yards, 23-17. Fourth quarter, 1-yard touchdown run, Joe Mixon, 24-23 Bengals. Field goal, Randy Bullock, 27-23 Bengals. And Clayton Fedgelim, 83-yard fumble return for touchdown to cap it off. 34-23 Cincinnati is your final. A tie in week 1. I don't think anybody could have seen it coming, but it's so typical Browns to do that as they tie with the Steelers at 21. Well, the Browns didn't lose. That's what the headline says. Ben Roethlisberger had a rough game. 23 of 41, 335 yards, a touchdown, and 3 picks. Tyrod Taylor, 15 of 40, 197 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Scoreless through the first. Second quarter, 4-yard touchdown run, James Conner, 7-0 Steelers. Third quarter, 20-yard rushing touchdown, Tyrod Taylor, 7-7. Big Ben to Antonio Brown, 22 yards, 14-7 Steelers. 22-yard run, James Conner, 21-7 Steelers. Fourth quarter, here come the Browns. Carlos Hyde, 1-yard run, 21-14. Tyrod Taylor to Josh Gordon, 17 yards, 21-21. Both kickers blew opportunities to win the games in overtime. But, oh well, it's a tie. And I think this doesn't bode well for Pittsburgh because I think Cincinnati's for real. And if Pittsburgh wants to win their division and get a home playoff game, that tie can come back to hurt them when it comes down to tiebreakers, potentially. The Chiefs defeated the Chargers 38-28. Patrick Mahomes was freaking awesome. 15 of 27, 256 yards, 4 touchdowns. Phillip Rivers was pretty good as well. 34 of 51, 424 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. First quarter, Tyreek Hill to the house. 91-yard punt return for touchdown. 7-0 Chiefs. Caleb Sturgis field goal, 7-3. Tyreek Hill from Patrick Mahomes, 58 yards, 14-3 Chiefs. Sturgis another field goal, 14-6. Second quarter, Austin Eckler, 13-yard pass from Phillip Rivers. They tried to go for 2 for the tie. They failed to get the 2-point conversion pass, 14-12. Harrison Butker field goal, 17-12. Third quarter, DeAnthony Thomas from Patrick Mahomes, 1 yard, 24-12. Anthony Sherman from Patrick Mahomes for 36 yards for a touchdown pass, 31-12. Fourth quarter, Keenan Allen, 20-yard pass from Phillip Rivers. And 2-point conversion good, Rivers to Antonio Gates, 31-20. Mahomes to Tyreek Hill, 1 yard, 38-20. And the Chargers get within 8 on a 4-yard touchdown pass from Phillip Rivers to Tyrell Williams. Melvin Gordon runs for 2-point conversion. That was good to make it 38-28 as your final. The Broncos defeated the Seahawks 27-24. This had a push in the making. Broncos were a 3-point favorite. And I knew this had a Broncos win by 3 written all over it, even though I think I predicted a 5-point Bronco win. Case Keenum had an interesting game. 25 of 39, 329 yards, 3 touchdowns, but also 3 interceptions. Russell Wilson, 19 of 33, 298 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Pat Lindsey was a surprise player for the Broncos in this game, 15 carries for 71 yards. First quarter, Russell Wilson to Will Dissly, 15 yards, 7-0 Seahawks. Phillip Lindsay, 29-yard pass from Case Keenum, 7-7. Phillip Lindsay was a surprise player in this game for Denver. Second quarter, Sebastian Janikowski, field goal, 10-7. Case Keenum to Emmanuel Sanders, 43-yarder, 14-10 Broncos. Brandon McManus, field goal, 17-10 Broncos. Third quarter, Brandon Marshall, 20 yards from Russell Wilson, ties it up at 17 apiece. Brandon McManus, field goal, 20-17. Fourth quarter, Seahawks take the lead on a 51-yard touchdown pass from Russell Wilson to Tyler Lockett, 24-20. Then the Broncos answer back. Case Keenum to Demaryius Thomas for 4 yards, 27-24 Broncos, your final. The Panthers defeated the Cowboys 16-8. This was an ugly game from start to finish. Jesus. Cam Newton, 17 of 26, 161 yards, 13 carries, 58 yards, and a rushing touchdown. Dak Prescott, 19 of 29, 170 yards. The only scoring came in the second and fourth quarters. Second quarter, you had the Cam Newton 4-yard run, 7-0 Panthers. The Graham Gano field goal, 10-7, halftime. Fourth quarter, Alex Arma 1-yard run, 16-0 Panthers. The extra point was no good. And Cowboys get their lone touchdown on a 4-yard run by Ezekiel Elliott. Dak Prescott run for 2-point conversion, 16-8, your final. The Redskins defeated the Cardinals 24-6. A nice win for the Redskins, even though I do not think the Cardinals are going to be good. Alex Smith, 21 of 30, 255 yards, 2 touchdowns. Sam Bradford, 20 of 34, 153 yards, and a pick. No scoring in the first. Second quarter, the Redskins broke out with 3 touchdowns. Smith to Chris Thompson for 13 yards, 7-0 Redskins. 1-yard run, Adrian Peterson, 14-0 Redskins. Smith to Jordan Reed, 4 yards, 21-0 Redskins. Fourth quarter, Dustin Hopkins, 31-yard field goal, 24-0. Then a David Johnson 2-yard run, 2-point conversion failed. 24-6 was your final. In what was the most fascinating game of the night, the Packers defeated the Bears 24-23. Fascinating to say the least. 20 points down for the Packers. Aaron Rodgers leaves the game with a knee injury. He comes back in the third quarter, leads the Packers to this tremendous victory over an upstart Bears team that just added Khalil Mack to their defense. And Mack, I thought, was tremendous as well, but he was just overshadowed by the brilliance of Aaron Rodgers, who had 286 yards and 3 touchdown passes, 20 of 30. Mitch Trubisky, 23 of 35, 171 yards. First quarter, 2-yard rushing touchdown, Mitch Trubisky, 7-0 Bears. Second quarter, Cody Parkey field goal, 10-0. Pick 6, Khalil Mack, 17-0. Third quarter, Cody Parkey field goal, 20-0. Mason Crosby, 42-yard field goal, Packers on the board. Fourth quarter, here come the Packers. Rodgers to Jermonio Allison, 39 yards, 20-10. Rodgers to Devontae Adams, 12 yards, 20-17. Cody Parkey, 32-yard field goal, 23-17. And the go-ahead touchdown. Rodgers to Randall Cobb, 75 yards, 24-3 Packers. And for Randall Cobb, good way to kick off a contract year. Tonight you have The Jets and the Lions, 7:10 ESPN. I have the Lions winning that game. Matt Patricia, first game as an NFL coach against Sam Darnold and the Jets. Darnold making his NFL debut, the youngest starting quarterback, I believe, ever to start an NFL game, 21 years old. Rams at the Raiders, 10:20 ESPN. The return of John Gruden to the sidelines, and I think it's going to be ugly. I predicted that the Rams would win big. And the Raiders will miss Khalil Mack. Their defense is a joke. I think the Rams are going to run all over them and throw all over them. I can't wait to watch Twitter tonight and all the John Gruden jokes. All right. I already went over the Delaney Walker injury. Another injury that happened was Chantrell Henderson, the offensive lineman for the Texans. I believe he's out for the year. That's a loss for the Texans to what is already a bad offensive line to begin with. Baseball. I'm going to be super quick here. Just going to run through yesterday's games and go over tonight's slate. The Blue Jays defeated the Indians 6-2. Toronto 65-78. Cleveland 81-62. Thomas Pannone with the win. Mike Clevenger with the loss. Ken Giles with the save. Cardinals defeat the Tigers 5-2 to avoid the sweep. Cards are 79-64. Detroit's 59-84. John Gant with the win. Michael Fulmer with the loss. Carlos Martinez with the save. The Mets defeated the Phillies 6-4. Jacob deGrom got scratched. He's going, or was supposed to go to the ninth. That game got rained out. Get to more of tonight's games later. The Mets are 65-77. The Phillies are 74-68. Drew Gagnon with the win. Vince Velasquez with the loss. Seth Lugo with the save. The Rays defeated the Orioles 8-3. The Rays are 78-64. The Orioles are 41-102. Yanni Chirinos with the win. Josh Rogers with the loss. Breaking NFL news real quick. Doug Baldwin, grade 2, partial MCL tear per source. It's a matter of how much time he will miss rather than whether he'll miss time or not. The Angels defeated the White Sox 1-0. The Angels are 71-72. The White Sox are 56-87. Andrew Heaney with the win. Ian Hamilton with the loss. Jose Alvarez with the save. The Brewers defeated the Giants 6-3. The Brewers are 82-62. The Giants are 68-76. Corbin Burns with the win. Madison Bumgarner with the loss. Corey Knebel with the save. The Twins defeated the Royals 3-1. The Twins are 65-77. The Royals are 47-95. The game ended on a walk-off homer in the bottom of the ninth by Williams Astudillo. Trevor Hildenberger with the win. Jason Hamill with the loss. Dodgers defeated the Rockies 9-6. Big weekend for the Dodgers. They're 78-65. The Rocks are 78-64. Rich Hill with the win. Tyler Anderson with the loss. Scott Alexander with the save. The Mariners defeated the Yankees 3-2. The Mariners are 79-64. The Yanks are 89-54. Alex Colon with the win. Dallin Betances with the loss. Edwin Diaz with the save. The Athletics defeated the Rangers 7-3. Oakland's 87-57. Texas is 61-82. Sean Kelly with the win. Ariel Gerardo with the loss. The Padres defeated the Reds 7-6. Craig Stroman with the win. Rafael Iglesias with the loss. Kirby Yates with the save. Pods are 57-88. The Reds are 61-83. The Braves defeated the Diamondbacks 9-5. Big weekend for the Braves. Good series win. They're 79-64. The Diamondbacks are 76-67. Sam Freeman with the win. Brad Boxberger with the loss. The Red Sox defeated the Astros 6-5 to avoid the sweep. Boston's 98-46. Houston's 89-54. Craig Kimbrell with the win. Hector Rondon with the loss. Cubs Nationals was postponed. Marlins Pirates postponed. Tonight's slate. 6 o'clock Astros Tigers. Justin Verlander and Francisco Liriano. The story of this game, I just realized this right now. Justin Verlander's return to Detroit. I think he's going to pitch very well against his former team. And I think the Tigers fans are going to give him a nice standing ovation. And that's exactly what I expect, and that's exactly what he deserves. Dodgers Reds at 6:40. Alex Wood and Cody Reed. 7 o'clock Nationals Phillies. Eric Fien and Jake Arrieta. Marlins Mets postponed makeup date is Wednesday. Indians Rays. Corey Kluber and Diego Castillo. 8 o'clock Brewers Cubs. Wade Miley, John Lester. Yankees Twins. Jay Happ and Kyle Gibson. 8:15 White Sox Royals. Lucas Giolito and Jacob Junis. Pirates Cardinals. Trevor Williams and Adam Wainwright. Wainwright's first start in a long time. 8:40 Diamondbacks Rockies. Zach Godley and Herman Marquez. 10 o'clock Rangers Angels. Mike Minor and Jaime Barria. Braves Giants 10:15. Sean Newcomb and Derek Rodriguez. I want to go over the wild card standings real quick. The AL's pretty much over. We know who is going to be in that wild card game. It's the Yankees and the A's. It's just a matter of where they're playing it. The A's are 3 back in the loss column of the Yankees. And that was big of Oakland to take 2 out of 3 from them earlier in the week to gain a couple games on New York. And in the National League, you have the Brewers and the Cardinals right now. The Dodgers are a game back. The Cardinals have not been playing that great of late. Diamondbacks are 3 back. Phillies 4.5 back. I think the Phillies are almost close to being done. I think their avenue to make the playoffs is to beat the Braves and win that division. And without further ado, the power rankings that I do every single week. I'm going to go from 30 to 1, as I always do, each and every week. 30 is the Orioles. They're already at 100 losses. 29, the Royals. They're the next team that's going to hit 100 losses. 28 is the White Sox. 27 is the Padres. 26 is the Marlins. Neither of these teams are playing really that well. White Sox potentially lost Michael Kopech for all next year, Tommy John surgery. That's a huge loss and a big step back for that franchise. Padres have shown some young talent within the last month or so, and I think that's a franchise that's heading in the right direction, as well as the White Sox, but I know the Kopech injury is a step back. Miami Marlins just playing out the string. Galladay, that guy Galladay, he's playing pretty well. And their pitching has been a little inconsistent. Some of their younger guys have been a little better, like Trevor Williams and Jose Arena. 25 is the Detroit Tigers. Talked about them a little bit. Michael Fulmer has not pitched well since coming off the DL. They have Verlander coming to town tonight. It's going to be a nice little reunion in Detroit. 24 is the Cincinnati Reds. They just need some pitching before I have to take them seriously as a franchise heading in the right direction. But they have so many good position prospects, and they do have some young pitching prospects, so we just have to see how they pan out. 23 is the Texas Rangers, just playing out the string right now. Wouldn't be surprised if they're a team next year that ends up making an off-season move this winter to make themselves a better team for next season, kind of like what Philadelphia did last year. 22 is the Mets. They've been playing a little better. They're over 500 since the All-Star break. Their terrible month of June absolutely killed this team, or else they'd probably be probably a little bit below where the Phillies are. Maybe a little bit better than the Nationals, but a little bit worse than the Phillies, somewhere in between those two teams. 21 is the Toronto Blue Jays. They're playing out the string. I don't think Vlad Jr. is going to get called up this year, and that'd be a travesty to that franchise and those fans. 20 is the Minnesota Twins, playing out the string too. They had a walk-off win yesterday. 19th, the Angels. Shohei Ohtani, supposed to get Tommy John surgery, but he's still hitting, and hitting like a beast. 18th, San Francisco Giants. Madison Bumgarner hasn't really pitched that great since coming back off the injury. I just think he's bored. Wouldn't be shocked if he's traded in the offseason. 17, the Nationals, playing out the string. This is Bryce Harper's swan song, pretty much, as a member of the Nats. 16's the Pirates, playing out the string, too. 15's the Seattle Mariners. They're going to start to do that with that series loss to the Yankees. That's a team that just quit. And that fight that they had in the locker room pretty much derailed that team. 14th, the Tampa Bay Rays. I think they might finish closer to the Yankees in the Athletics than to the Mariners in the standings. They're playing great baseball. 13 is the Philadelphia Phillies, who have not played great baseball of late. 12 is the Arizona Diamondbacks. Brutal series loss to the Braves. 11 is the Cardinals. They have not played good baseball of late. 10 is the Colorado Rockies. Not a great series loss to the Dodgers, but still are in first place. 9 is the Braves. Some brutal losses to Boston. Nice way to rebound in Arizona to take that series. 8 is the Dodgers. Big series win for them over the Rockies over the weekend. 7 is the Brewers. I think they're right up the Cubs' heels, and the Cubs better look out. 6 is the Indians. They're just playing out the string. They know they're going to be the 3 seed in the American League playoffs. 5 is the Cubs. I think their NL Central chances are good, but it's not a slam dunk like we thought it was. Chris Bryant's back, and I think this team, starting tonight, will start to pull away from the Brewers. 4 is the Oakland Athletics. Good series win over the Yankees, and then they won over the Rangers. But they have just so many injuries. That's why they're not ahead of the Yankees in these rankings. And the Yankees played a better series in Seattle than they did against Oakland. They really only played one bad game against Oakland, which was that game that Luis Severino started. Gary Sanchez was just anemic behind the plate. But the Yankees are this high because Aaron Judge is closer to returning. Didi Gregorius is back. Gary Sanchez, it's just been a lost season for him, offensively and defensively. I think he's going to have a very good offseason to get himself right. No matter how far the Yankees go, they have to address him in the offseason somehow. If I had to guess, I think he's still on the team next year and is still their starting catcher, but I don't know if his leash will be pretty long because, let's face it, Greg Bird is not in the future plans of the New York Yankees. I think there's a chance they go out and make a splash for a first baseman this offseason, whether that's trade or free agency, or just ride out with Luke Voit. But I don't think they're going to buy into this Luke Voit thing. But we'll see if he continues to hit for them. 2 is the Astros. Probably should have swept Boston last night, if not for an anemic call in which Jose Altuve was clearly safe rather than out. Then the Astros would be number 1 in these power rankings. Except the umpires made a bad call, which cost them the number 1 spot in the power rankings. Boston's still number 1, but it's not a far gap anymore as it was maybe Tuesday or Wednesday as they were coming back to defeat the Braves in those games. But that says more about the Braves bullpen rather than the Red Sox potentially down the road, although the Red Sox are a great offensive team. But I just think that the Astros are closer to the Red Sox than giving credit for. And same with the Yankees, because they're starting to get guys back. Their starting pitching's been a lot better over the past week, with the exception of Luis Severino in Oakland. And even the Athletics and the Cubs seem closer to the Red Sox than giving credit for, too. And the Indians I'm going to throw in there as well, because they split in Fenway, and then the Red Sox still have to go to Cleveland in this season. And that's a big series for the Indians to prove themselves whether they can knock off Boston in October or not. Players of the week, I'm going to go Shohei Ohtani and Bryce Harper. They had big weeks. Those are, ironically, the 2 players that were picked by the league for this week's Players of the Week. Ohtani, in the wake of the Tommy John news, hitting all those home runs in Texas. And Bryce Harper had a big weekend, as the Nats played a little bit of spoiler. Next, I want to talk about the U.S. Open, the men's side. It was a good match. Good U.S. Open, but it's all going to be overshadowed because of the Serena Williams controversy and how there's so many rough calls against her. Novak Djokovic defeated Juan Del Porto. I correctly got this match right. Djokovic defeated Del Porto 6-3 in the first match. 7-6 in the second match and 6-3 in the third match for Djokovic to get the win. Congratulations to Novak Djokovic, and congratulations to Naomi Osaka as well for winning the Women's U.S. Open. Keegan Bradley and Justin Rose actually were the top two finishers in the BMW Championship. They both had a -20, but Keegan Bradley wins on a tiebreaker. He has the earnings of $1.6 million. Justin Rose gets $972,000. Billy Horschel and Xander Schauffele tied for third with -19 with $522,000. Rory McIlroy came in fifth with a -18 and an earning of $360,000. Tiger Woods came in sixth with the tie, and he got an earning of $312,750. Ricky Fowler is in a tie for eighth with a score of a -16, so one back of Tiger. He earns $252,000. Justin Thomas had a -15 with a score and an earnings of $189,000. He was in a tie for 12th. Bubba Watson was tied for 16th with a -13 and an earnings of $144,000. Disappointing tournament for Brooks Koepka. He had a -12, tied for 19th with an earning of $109,080. WNBA Finals. Game 2, it was actually a much more competitive game than Game 1, exactly like I thought, but the Storm came away 75-73. Brianna Stewart had 25 points in the game, 9 in the fourth quarter, 7 for 13 on field goals, 10 for 14 on free throws. Elena Delle Donne, 17 points in the game in defeat. Game 3 is Wednesday night, and I'll pick that on Wednesday's podcast. A very surprising trade in the National Hockey League last night. Max Pacioretty was traded from the Ottawa Senators to the Las Vegas Golden Knights for Thomas Tatar, Nick Suzuki, and a 2019 second-round pick. I think Montreal did well in this trade. I think Suzuki could be a good player for them. And I think Pacioretty's worth a second rather than a first. So a good package back for the Habs. Tatar's a nice asset too. Maybe they can flip him potentially again if the Canadians are as bad as people may seem that they think they can be. College football. Going to go over the new AP poll before I do my power rankings. I predicted how the top 25 was going to play out, but I was off on a couple teams. Alabama's won with 54 votes for first. Clemson second with 6 votes for first. Georgia 3, Ohio State 4, Oklahoma 5, Wisconsin 6 with 1 vote for first, which is curious to me, with the first place vote. 7 Auburn, 8 Notre Dame, 9 Stanford, 10 Washington, 11 Penn State, 12 LSU, 13 Virginia Tech, 14 West Virginia, 15 TCU, 16 Mississippi State, 17 Boise State, 18 UCF, 19 Michigan, 20 Oregon, 21 Miami, 22 USC, 23 Arizona State, 24 Oklahoma State, 25 Michigan State. And the others receiving votes: Utah, A&M, BC, Houston, Maryland, Colorado, Iowa, Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina State, Ole Miss, Hawaii, Washington State, USF, South Carolina, and Florida State. Now I'm going to do my power rankings. Go from 130 to 1, as I did last week. 130 is UTEP, 129 is San Jose State, 128 is New Mexico State. Those are the 3 worst teams in the country, I think. 127 is UConn, 126 is UMass, 125 is Texas State, 124 is Kent State, 123 is Rice, 122 is Charlotte. 121 Bowling Green. 120 is Georgia State. 119 Old Dominion. 118 South Alabama. 117 New Mexico. 116 Western Kentucky. A lot of these teams are winless. Some of them have wins. Charlotte and Rice have wins, but I'm not buying. Western Kentucky, such a disappointing loss to Maine. New Mexico is as bad as, or looked as bad as most people thought they could be. Kent State got a win over Howard, who's a good FCS school, which is why they're ahead of Texas State, who got a win over Texas Southern. UMass is such a disappointment. 115 is Akron, who I can't judge on because their Nebraska game was canceled and they beat an FCS school. 114 is SMU. What a big disappointment. They're 0-2. They weren't even competitive against TCU or North Texas. 113 is UAB, who had a disappointing loss to Coastal Carolina. 112 Miami of Ohio. They lost to Cincinnati. 111 Central Michigan, who is 0-2. They lost to Kentucky, and they lost to Kansas, which was a dismal loss because Kansas is perhaps the worst Power 5 team. There has been the worst Power 5 team over the last couple years. And Kansas' losing streak's finally over, their long road losing streak, and I'll get to them in a couple minutes. 110 Liberty, classic letdown game after a big win, as they lost to Army. 109 Coastal Carolina, a team that I don't think is going to be good this year. I just have to give them credit for their thrashing of UAB. Maybe they're better than expected. 108 Georgia Southern, they're 2-0, but a soft 2-0. 107 is UTSA. They're 0-2, but their 0-2 is against two Power 5 schools that both might be better than expected. We already know which one is better than expected. The other ones remain to be seen, and I'll get to those teams in a minute. 106 is Louisiana. Can't really judge them. They didn't play last week. 105 is Ball State. They're higher than they should be. They were competitive with Notre Dame. Maybe Notre Dame just was looking ahead a little bit, as they didn't look good at all. I'll get to Notre Dame in a little bit. But Ball State, I think, deserves credit for hanging in with one of the best teams in the country. 104 is Western Michigan, who were just blown out in Ann Arbor against Michigan. UNLV's 103. They had the win over UTEP. 102 is Marshall. They're 2-0, but it looks like a soft 2-0 to me. 101 is Kansas. The road losing streak's over, and they deserve credit for that. This went the opposite of what I thought. I thought they'd beat Nichols and lose to Central Michigan. I was wrong. They actually have a winnable game against the number 100 team on this list, which is Rutgers, next week. And Rutgers was 101. They got their doors blown off of them in Columbus against Ohio State. But they always lose bad there. And they're a team that might be the worst in the Big Ten this year. Maybe they're worse than Illinois, but I'll get to Illinois in a minute. 99 Northern Illinois, who is 0-2 with 2 losses to Power 5 schools, so it's hard to judge them. Maybe they're worse than they're thought, or maybe those 2 Power 5 defenses are good in Utah and in Iowa. Which I think both of those defenses are good, by the way. 98 is FIU. They deserve some credit. They're competitive with Indiana, and then they won at Old Dominion, so maybe they're better than expected. 97 is North Carolina. They're obviously not better than expected. They're 0-2. They lost to Cal and then to East Carolina. Boy. Speaking of East Carolina, they're 96. I have to give them credit. Way to bounce back from losing to an FCS school and turning it around and beating a Power 5 school. Good for East Carolina. Maybe they're better than expected this year. Maybe week 1 was an aberration, or maybe North Carolina's this bad. We'll learn a lot about East Carolina as the weeks go on. 95 Temple. What a big disappointment at 0-2. Two close losses, one to Villanova and then one to Buffalo. Boy. 94 is Illinois, 2-0 on the year. Their test is next week at Soldier Field against South Florida. I think we'll know more about Illinois next week. They could be a surprise team in the Big Ten, or maybe they're typical Illinois and just beat two lousy teams in Kent State and then I believe it was Western Illinois. 93 is Middle Tennessee, who in week 1 lost to Vandy, and then last week bounced back and got a win against UT Martin. It's hard to judge them. 92 Southern Miss, after blowing out an FCS team in week 1, they lose to UL Monroe in week 2. So we don't know what Southern Miss really is. Speaking of UL Monroe, they're 91. Very impressive win at Southern Miss. They're probably one of the better and improved teams in the Sun Belt this year. 90 Oregon State. I think this is a little high for them. They're probably not this good, but they're certainly better than Rutgers right now and perhaps Kansas. They showed a lot by putting up 31 in an ugly defeat to Ohio State. Even though they gave up so many points to Ohio State, they played well offensively in that game, and then they took care of business against an FCS school. We'll learn more about the Beavers within the next few weeks. 89's Ohio, the favorite in the MAC coming into this season. They've only played one game, which was a win over Howard. We'll learn more about them next week as they take on Virginia. 88 is Troy, who was blown out week 1 by Boise, bounces back and destroys an FCS opponent in week 2. I think Boise State is just very good, and Troy is better than what they've shown in week 1. And they're going to be a force to be reckoned with in the Sun Belt this year, despite their bad showing against Boise. 87 is Tulane, who lost week 1 to Wake Forest in overtime, then rebound and win in week 2 against Nicholls State, who's the 11th ranked FCS team. They have a big test next week at UAB, and we'll learn more about them next week. 86 is Tulsa. Sometimes I just like to group teams from the same conference together in the beginning of the power rankings. They had a close loss at Texas. Maybe they're better than we think, or maybe that says a lot about Texas, but we'll get to Texas in a minute. 85 is BYU. Very disappointing loss to Cal after winning at Arizona. And they have a tough one next week at Wisconsin, so maybe that says more about Arizona. Oi. We'll get to them. 84 is Air Force, who hung around with FAU. They're 1-1 now. 83 is Pitt. They were terrible last week against Penn State. There's no other way to put it. Messy weather. They just flat out quit on Pat Narduzzi. Maybe Pitt is this bad and just look good against an FCS team in week 1. We'll find out as the weeks go, but I look like I'm right just with that Penn State performance alone. 82 is UCLA. 0-2 under Chip Kelly. They lost to Oklahoma. No shame in losing to Oklahoma, though. 81's Colorado State. Pick up a win against Arkansas. They're now 1-2. But they are probably more likely headed for a 5-7, 4-8 type of year, because their defense is so bad. And maybe Arkansas isn't as good as we think. 80 Wyoming. That's a disappointment. They're 1-2. They lost to Missouri. And they probably aren't the team that is most likely to upset the Broncos. 79 is Nevada, who after absolutely demoralizing an FCS school in week 1, get their doors blown off them by Vandy. But I think that might actually say more about Vandy and how the folks have underrated them more than Nevada. I think Nevada still has a chance to get to a bowl this year. 78 is Arkansas State, who had a blowout loss in Tuscaloosa against Alabama. No shame in losing to Saban and company. And they should still be one of the better teams in the Sun Belt. 77 is Army. Great bounce-back win over Liberty after losing to Duke. I'm higher on the Black Knights than most because I like their coach, even though they had some turnover on offense. And they're a good home team, too. 76 is Appalachian State, perhaps the best team in the Sun Belt. Bounced back after the demoralizing Penn State loss and absolutely demolished Charlotte like I thought they'd do. 75 is Louisiana Tech, who is 2-0 with their most recent win coming up against an FCS opponent. Next week's going to say, I'm sorry, not next week, the following week they're at Tiger Stadium against LSU. That's going to say a lot about Louisiana Tech and whether they're to be taken seriously as a real group of five threat or not. I'm leaning towards no. 74 is FAU. Good bounce back win over Air Force. They might not be as good as we thought, though, because they did not look good against Oklahoma, and they let an Air Force team that people thought that wasn't good in the Mountain West hang around. But I thought Air Force was going to be better than expected. But at the same time, I thought FAU was going to blow the doors off of Air Force. Okay, maybe Air Force is better than we think, or maybe FAU isn't as good as we think. We'll see. 73 is Tennessee. They bounced back after their dismal performance against West Virginia and beat up of an FCS school. 72 Utah State. An impressive win over New Mexico State. And they might actually be one of the better group of five teams this year, and especially from the Mountain West Division standpoint as well. 71 is North Texas. This might be the best team in Conference USA. They absolutely destroyed SMU in Week 1. Then they beat up on Incarnate Word, who's an FCS team, in Week 2. Next week's going to say a lot about them as they take on Arkansas. 70's Arkansas, believe it or not. Disappointing loss against Colorado State. If they lose against North Texas, they might be headed for 3-9, 4-8. 69 is Georgia Tech. They lost to USF. I picked the USF on the podcast. I just don't think the Yellow Jackets are that good, personally. 68 Virginia. Close loss to Indiana. No shame in that. They weren't favored in that game. 67 Texas Tech, good bounce back win, and they destroyed an FCS team. They're going to put up points on people, but I don't think they can stop people, especially in the Big 12 with those good quarterbacks that they're going to eventually face with Will Grier and Kyler Murray and Cam Robinson from TCU. He looks pretty solid as well. 66 is Purdue. They're 0-2, but they lost two close games, one against Northwestern, who I'll get to in a minute, and once against Eastern Michigan, which was last week. Maybe Eastern Michigan is one of the good teams in the MAC this year. But two close losses in a row for Purdue. They look like they're headed for 4-8, 3-9, because they had to win those two games if they were to make a bowl. Number 65 is Toledo. They've only played one game, and they destroyed an FCS school. Can't really judge them yet. 64 Eastern Michigan, great win over Purdue. That might, as we look back on the season, be one of the better group of five over Power 5 wins of the year. As long as if Purdue turns it around, but it may not be good if Purdue is bad. 63 is Buffalo, who might be the best team in the MAC. An impressive win at Temple. 62 is Baylor, 2-0 with a win over UTSA. They might be better than expected, but I think it's remained to be seen. We'll see how they do in Big 12 play. They have Kansas coming up in a couple of weeks. They should win that game. Big game for them this weekend as Duke comes to town, though. And I think those two games, especially the Duke game, is going to say a lot about Baylor as we go forward this season. If they are able to upset Duke, then they could very well be headed to a bowl game. 61 is Kansas State. Dismal loss against the Mississippi State Bulldogs, but Mississippi State is just miles better than Kansas State. The Wildcats just don't have the talent this year. Although I love Bill Snyder, and he likes to sneak up on people, but I just don't think they're headed for good things this year. They might be in a bowl game, but it won't be a good bowl game. 60, Fresno State. Disappointing loss at Minnesota last week. I think they have an excellent chance this week against UCLA. 59 is Hawaii, the 3-0 Hawaii Warriors. They are the surprise of the Mountain West, maybe the surprise of the year so far through 3 weeks. That's probably just because of that win over Colorado State, because that Navy game looked winnable to them because of Navy traveling and whatnot. But hey, maybe this team's for real. Maybe they're a threat to knock off one of the better Mountain West teams this year. 58 Cincinnati, another big surprise. They're 2-0. They're headed for a bowl game in all likelihood. They could very well be the surprise of the AAC this year. 57 is Wake Forest. Don't know really what to make of them. I think this week against Boston College, we'll learn more about Wake. Yes, they're 2-0, but their 2 wins are over Tulane and Towson. 56 is Syracuse, who is also 2-0, wins over Western Michigan and Wagner. Big game on Saturday, and if they are to go to a bowl game this year, they have to win this week against Florida State, who I'll get to right now, who's 55 on my list. They almost lost to Samford. I wanted to put them lower than this. Maybe the Samford game was a wake-up call for them to get them going. But I don't know if this team's going to make a bowl. And my bold prediction for them this season is that people are going to be questioning the Willie Taggart hire instead of them going out to get a bigger name. That already looks like a spectacular prediction made by me. I don't want to declare it a win yet, but it's getting closer. And if they lose to Syracuse, it's going to look even better. 54 is Louisville. They bounced back with the win over Indiana State, who's an FCS team after that loss to Bama. Still really don't know what to make of them yet, as next week we'll be tallying with a game against Western Kentucky, who is winless too. 53 is Navy. Big time win over Memphis at home. Memphis is actually 52. That was a disappointing loss for them, although I had Navy as my moneyline pick of the week last week. I just thought that Navy was going to come out strong and win like they did. But the Tigers could have easily won that game. I just think that they're more talented. They're 1-1. But they have some time to ride the ship a little bit. 51's Missouri. 2 nice wins over. One was over an FCS school. The other was over Wyoming. I need to see more from them. 50 is Wazoo. Big time win at Wyoming, followed by a win over San Jose State. I think these next couple weeks are going to be telling for Wazoo. 49 is Cal. A nice win at BYU. They'll slow down the BYU. Might be a surprise team. Train a little bit. Hey, maybe Cal's a surprise. They're 2-0. But those wins are both over 2 teams that aren't good in North Carolina and BYU. So I have some more questions than answers regarding Cal. 48 is Indiana. They have a win over FIU and then a win over Virginia. Big Ten play is going to show a lot about the Hoosiers to me. The most disappointing team in the country so far, 47, the Arizona Wildcats. 0-2, losses to BYU and Houston. I think Houston's a better team than given credit for. They have a stud defensive lineman in Ed Oliver and a rising star quarterback in De'Ara King. Houston could very well be a group of 5 New Year's Six Bowl threat this season, and that was a statement win for the Cougars. I'll get more to them for a second. But Arizona State, what a disappointment for Khalil Tate and Kevin Sumlin. I'm tempted to say this isn't a bowl team. 46 is Iowa State, who played only one game, which was last week, and lost 13-3 against Iowa. So not much to judge them on. Next week's going to say a lot about them as they take on the Oklahoma Sooners in Ames. 45 is Northwestern. Disappointing loss to Duke at home. I took Northwestern to win that game. I was wrong. They lost 21-7. They might be headed for 7-5 or 6-6. But their slate is very hard. Northwestern's a team that always surprises when you don't think they have a chance and always disappoints when you expect them to do good things. And I like Pat Fitzgerald a lot. 44 is Minnesota. They're 2-0. Good win over Fresno State. A lot of people thought that Fresno State should have been favored and should have won that game. But no, Minnesota wins. They're 2-0. Maybe they'll be a surprise team out of the Big Ten this year, potentially down the road, that can knock off some teams. 43 is Texas, who barely beat Tulsa. Big game for them on Saturday against USC. That's going to say a lot about them, and it's going to say an awful lot about JT Daniels and the Trojans, who I'll get to in a minute. 42 is San Diego State. I probably am overrating this team. They just absolutely destroyed an FCS team. They lost to Stanford, but I think Stanford's defense is one of the best ones in the country. And I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that. Certainly the best one I've seen in the Pac-12 so far this year. But San Diego State, to me, is not a bad team whatsoever. They have a big game on Saturday against Arizona State. 41 is NC State. They haven't really impressed me. The James Madison game left a sour taste in my mouth. They should have put them away. But they came out and put away Georgia State like they're supposed to do. Big one on Saturday for them against West Virginia. We'll say a lot about them. 40's Nebraska, who finally played a game, but they lost to Colorado. They should have won that game. A lot of mistakes and missed kicks and turnovers cost them in that game. 39 Maryland, 2-0. Got to give them credit. Destroyed Bowling Green. A lot of people thought they'd have a letdown game at Bowling Green from a point spread standpoint, but not a lose outright standpoint. But Maryland might be the surprise of the Big Ten this year. 38 is Vandy, who, to me, had 2 impressive wins. One over Nevada and one over Middle Tennessee. I think this is the surprise team in the SEC this season. 37 is South Florida, who beat Georgia Tech, as I predicted. I think they could be in for some good things this year under Charlie Strong. 36 is Florida, disappointing loss to Kentucky, but I still think that this is a solid team. 35 is Iowa, wins the Cyhawk 13-3. Wasn't all that impressed with Iowa, but they have a really good defense, but a suspect offense. 34 Ole Miss, very good offense, but a suspect defense. Big test for them this week as they take on the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I think they're in for a possible rude awakening, too. 33 is South Carolina, who was destroyed by Georgia. I still believe South Carolina's a solid team. They can pick off some people this year, but they're just not on the level of Georgia. 32 Colorado, good win over Nebraska, took advantage of some turnovers. And they're 2-0. They're likely headed for a bowl this year. 31 is Utah. I wasn't that impressed with them against Northern Illinois. They have a big game this weekend against Washington. 30 is Texas A&M. I couldn't have been more encouraged with the team in defeat than I was with Texas A&M. Their quarterback was outstanding, making big throws late. If they made that 2-point conversion hey, maybe we're talking about an upset win for the Aggies. 29 is Boston College, who's looked impressive through 2 weeks so far. Thursday's going to say a lot about them as they take on Wake Forest. 28 Houston, big-time win over Arizona. They could very well be a surprise group of 5 team that could threat Boise State for the New Year's Six Bowl, potentially. 27's Oklahoma State. They're ranked. I don't think they should be ranked, although they are a good team. All they did was beat up on South Alabama and beat up on an FCS team. Their game this weekend against Boise State will say a lot about them. 26 is Kentucky, a team that you can make a case should be ranked. They had an impressive win at Florida. 25 Duke, who got the win over Northwestern. And have a big game on Saturday at Baylor. 24 Michigan State, disappointing loss to Herm Edwards and Arizona State. 23 USC, lost to Stanford, who I mentioned their defense might just be this good. I just don't trust JT Daniels on the road. Big test for them on Saturday in Texas, although Texas hasn't looked all that great. 22 UCF, they're 2-0, but I'm not impressed with their quarterback, Mackenzie Milton. 21 Arizona State, huge upset win over Michigan State. That's a team that's certainly headed for a bowl. That could be the surprise of the Pac-12 this year, and perhaps the surprise of college football. 20 is Oregon, who another win over an inferior opponent. 19 Miami, good bounce-back win over an FCS team. 18 Michigan, good bounce-back win over Western Michigan. 17 Boise State, another day, another destroying win, this time over UConn. Big game for them at Stillwater this week. 16 Mississippi State, big win at Kansas State. They'll be tested throughout the year in conference play. 15's TCU, big test for them this weekend as they take on Ohio State. 14's West Virginia, another day, another win, another big game for Will Grier. A test for them this weekend at NC State. 13 Penn State, great thrashing of Pitt. 12 Virginia Tech, got the win over an FCS school. 11 LSU, they got a win over an inferior opponent too. Big test for them this week as they take on Auburn. 10's Notre Dame. The Irish had a little bit of a letdown against Ball State, but they still managed to win the game. 9 Washington, did what they had to do and beat up an FCS team. 8 Stanford, looked really, really good on defense these first 2 games. They might be the best defense in the Pac-12 and one of the more underrated and good defenses in the country. 7 Auburn, big test for them this week as they take on LSU. 6 Oklahoma, they just beat UCLA. Now they go to Ames to take on Iowa State, who did not look good last week in Iowa City. 5 Wisconsin, another day, another win for them. 4 Ohio State, huge win over Rutgers. There's talk that Dwayne Haskins might be the best quarterback in the country. I wouldn't go there yet. Just have a signature moment against a good team before I inaugurate you. You're not better than Tua Tagovailoa. You're not better than Will Grier. Just show me before I anoint you, please. But they have a lot of talent on that team, nevertheless. 3 Georgia, very impressive win over South Carolina. They survived one of their biggest tests of the year. They're certainly a top 3 team in the country. 2 is Clemson. They survived a big road test at Texas A&M. Clemson's defense is just outstanding. I have to give credit to Kelly Bryant, the quarterback, who made some plays down the stretch in that game. And as I mentioned before, Texas A&M might be better than we expected. And number 1, no doubt about it, Alabama. Another day, another thrashing for Nick Saban's team. A test this week for them as they take on Ole Miss, who's an improved offensive team. And that should be a fun game down at the Grove. Guess the lines. I want to be quick with this. I really, 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 really do. And there should be some interesting lines. I'm very fascinated to see what some lines are, especially with some of those Power 5 mediocre teams against good group of fives. That's, to me, the most intrigue there. The first game is Boston College at Wake Forest. I have Boston College laying 4 points to Wake Forest. And Boston College is laying 6.5 points. So I was 2.5 points off there. And I do think that the right team is favored here. Tennessee Tech and Utah State won't be posted because that's an FCS team. But I had Utah State minus 40.5. Georgia State at Memphis Friday night, 7:30 ESPN. I have Memphis favored by 27.5. Memphis is favored by 27, so I was a half point off there. I didn't feel great about picking that line either. Oklahoma at Iowa State. I have Iowa State getting 8.5 from the Sooners. And the Sooners are laying 17.5, which is absolutely mind-boggling and crazy to me. Oklahoma's just beat on two bad teams in, one team that might not be bad in FAU, but a team that they should have been able to take care of, which they did, and UCLA, who's bad this year. And Iowa State, I think that's just an overreaction to them scoring a grand total of 3 points against an Iowa team that not many people think are going to be good. Tennessee is hosting UTEP, and I have Tennessee laying 38 points. Tennessee is laying 30, so I was 8 points off there. Indiana is hosting Ball State, and I have Indiana laying 20.5. Indiana's laying only 14. That's a little concerning to me. I think Indiana's better than this. Maybe they're overreacting to Ball State giving Notre Dame a game. Number 11th ranked Penn State is hosting Kent State. I have Penn State laying 33. And Penn State is laying 34.5. So I was a half point off on that line. Number 18th ranked UCF is at North Carolina. Believe it or not, I have UCF as a 10.5 point favorite over the Tar Heels. And Central Florida is laying 14.5 over the Tar Heels. And I still like UCF in this spot. But I don't know about the cover, but certainly in the game. But that is probably the right line. I was off on by 4 points there. 21st ranked Miami at Toledo. I have Miami laying 11.5. And Miami is laying only 10. So again, a 1.5 difference there. And this is an intriguing game to me because Miami might not be what we thought, and they might not even be the favorites in the Coastal Division. We might have learned that in week 1. It might be Virginia Tech right now. But hey, this week's going to say a lot about Miami. Rhode Island at UConn. That's an FCS school in Rhode Island. I think UConn should be laying 28. Troy at Nebraska. Big spot for both of these programs. I have Nebraska laying 17, and they're only laying 11.5. I think that's concerning. I think that's an overreaction to their loss to Colorado. Hawaii at Army. That's a very fascinating game. Hawaii with a chance to go 4-0. I have Army as a 12.5 point favorite over Hawaii, and Army's only laying 6.5. I think that Hawaii is getting a little bit too much respect, and Army is getting a little bit of disrespect. This reminds me of the Liberty line from last week a little bit, except that Hawaii is a better team than Liberty. Florida at Syracuse. This is, to me, one of the lines that I was most intrigued to see. I have the Seminoles laying 6 to the Orange, and the Seminoles are only laying 3.5 to the Orange. That's incredible. I think this would have been a double-digit spread if Florida State beat Virginia Tech and then blown out Samford. Rutgers at Kansas. I have Rutgers as a touchdown favorite over Kansas. And Kansas is giving 3 to Rutgers. That is stupid. Kansas only won 1 game over a lousy school from the MAC, and Rutgers got blown out by one of the best 5 teams in the country in the Ohio State Buckeyes. That's bogus to me. I think Rutgers should be favored, but they're probably just overreacting to Rutgers' bad performance, and Kansas actually winning a game on the road for once. Temple at Maryland. I have Maryland laying 23.5 to the Owls of Temple, and Maryland's only laying 15.5. So I was 8 points off there. I think Temple's getting a little bit too much respect, and Maryland's getting a little bit too much disrespect. I think Maryland's better than this, and Temple might not be that good. But meanwhile, to defend Temple a little bit, they lost 2 close games against one of the better FCS teams in Villanova and potentially the best MAC team in Buffalo. So they might not be that bad, but I think Maryland is better than we all thought. Murray State at Kentucky, that line's obviously not posted because that's an FCS school in Murray State. I have Kentucky laying 43. East Carolina at Virginia Tech, I have the Hokies laying 22.5 to the Pirates, and the Hokies are laying 28. So the line's bigger than I thought, and I was 5.5 points off there. Georgia Tech at Pitt. This was a hard line to pick. Pitt was terrible last week. Georgia Tech lost to South Florida. I have this as a pick 'em. This was the hardest line to pick, as I said. And Georgia Tech's actually laying 3.5. I think that's a big overreaction to Pitt. And Georgia Tech actually did put up some points against South Florida. Tulane at UAB. I think Tulane's a 2-point favorite at UAB. And Tulane is -4 at UAB. So I was 2 points off there. I was right on who would be favored. UC Davis at Stanford. I think the number 9th ranked team in the country is going to give 50.5, but that line's obviously not posted. Vandy at number 8, Notre Dame. I have Notre Dame laying 16.5 to a Vandy team that I think's very improved, and Notre Dame is laying 14.5. So I was 2 points off with that line. So I think that's a nice line. Ohio at Virginia. I have Virginia laying 13.5 to the Bobcats. And Virginia is laying only 6 to the Bobcats. So I was well off there. It looked like I was 7.5 points off on that one. I guess they don't think Virginia's good and they like this Ohio team. Georgia Southern at number 2, Clemson. I think Clemson's favored by 45.5. Clemson's favored by 33.5, so I was 11 points off there. I'm sorry, 12. BYU at Wisconsin. I think the number 6 team in the country is going to be laying 30.5 to BYU. And Wisconsin is only laying 22. So I was off on that line as well by a lot. LSU at Auburn. I have Auburn laying 5 to the Tigers of Louisiana State. Auburn's laying 9. Okay, that's out of whack. How is Auburn laying 9.5, actually, to LSU? That is ridiculous. I think that's a lot of disrespect to Ed Orgeron's team. 14 West Virginia at North Carolina State. I have the Mountaineers laying 7.5 to the Wolfpack. And the Mountaineers are only laying 4. I think that's curious. I think that's disrespectful to Will Grier. NC State, to me, has not looked that impressive. I mean, the Georgia State win was a one that they had to have. But Georgia State is one of the worst teams in the country. West Virginia is one of the best teams in the country, with the best quarterback perhaps in the country, certainly the best quarterback in the Big 12. And that's so disrespectful. I think West Virginia should be a touchdown favorite. The line that I was most fascinated to see, 17th ranked Boise State against 24 Oklahoma State. I have the Cowboys laying 2, and the Cowboys are laying 3, so I was 1 point off there. SMU at 19th ranked Michigan. I have Michigan minus 33, and the Wolverines are laying 35.5, so I was 2.5 points off on that one. Southern Miss at Appalachian State. I have the Mountaineers of Appalachian State laying 7.5 to a team that I was very disappointed in last week with Southern Miss. App State's laying 14.5. That's a lot of points because I don't think Southern Miss is that bad. It's probably just an Appalachian State overreaction a little bit. Miami of Ohio at Minnesota. I have Minnesota minus 15.5. Minnesota is laying 14. So I was 1.5 points off there. Lehigh Navy. That line's not posted because of FCS school in Lehigh. Navy I have laying 36.5. Central Michigan at Northern Illinois. I have Northern laying 14 to Central Michigan. And Northern is laying 14. So my first dead right pick of the Week 3 Guess the Lines. South Florida against Illinois from Soldier Field. I have the Bulls favored by 16. And the Bulls are only 9.5, which is to me is lunacy. I think part of this is the Soldier Field aspect. But to me, that line is awfully, awfully low. Duke at Baylor. I have Duke minus 6.5 at Waco. And Baylor is a 6-point favorite. How in the world? Duke is a better team than Baylor. What? That's lunacy. I don't get that one at all. That's a way too much respect for Matt Rule's team after beating a possibly subpar Conference USA team and a possibly subpar FCS team. How are they only laying, or I shouldn't even say, how are they laying 6? That is a lunacy line. I think Duke should be favored. UTSA at Kansas State. I have the Wildcats laying 17.5. And the Wildcats are laying 21.5, so it's 4 points off there. Don't have a problem with that. Colorado State at Florida. I have the Gators laying 11.5. This was a hard line to pick. And the Gators are laying 19, so I was way off on that one. Like I said, this was a hard one to predict. Intriguing game here. North Texas at Arkansas. I have Arkansas laying 16. Arkansas is laying 7. So it's a much lower line than I expected. Northern Texas is getting the respect that they deserve. Wofford at Wyoming. I have Wyoming laying 40.5, but that's an FCS school in Wofford. Another FCS school out here with Bowling Green hosting Eastern Kentucky. I had Bowling Green laying 35. Houston at Texas Tech. I had the Cougars as a road favorite at minus 1.5. And Texas Tech is actually a minus 2.5 point favorite. I can see that only because They're home, and Houston is like an in-state rival. But the Duke-Baylor thing to me is just lunacy. I'm not over that. San Jose State at number 20, Oregon. I have Oregon laying 48.5 to perhaps the worst team in the country. They're laying 41.5. So I was 7 points off on that line. I gave them a touchdown more. Another FCS team in New Hampshire going to Colorado. I have Colorado laying 44. Another FCS team in Idaho State at Cal. I have Cal laying 37.5. This line's posted. Old Dominion at Charlotte. This was a tough one to pick because Old Dominion is 0-2, and Charlotte is perceived to be one of the worst teams in the country. I have Old Dominion minus 6.5 at Charlotte. Old Dominion is only giving 2. Boy, a lot of people think that Old Dominion is headed for a disappointment of a season. Liberty is hosting an FCS school in Norfolk State. I had Liberty minus 27.5. FAU is hosting an FCS school in Bethune-Cookman. I have them laying 32 as they and the Owls. Eastern Michigan at Buffalo. This is a great MAC game. I have the Bulls laying 7, and the Bulls are laying 5. I'm okay with that line. The best team in the country at Ole Miss. I think the Tide are 13.5-point favorites. Gosh, I think I'm going to be low. And I am. They're laying 3 touchdowns. Minus 21 at Ole Miss. Boy, I think that I overreacted a little bit to Ole Miss in my prediction. But I guess they're not buying Ole Miss. Ole Miss was even an underdog in Week 1 to Texas Tech, which they shouldn't have been. Campbell at Coastal Carolina. Campbell's a FCS team. I have Coastal laying 25. Texas State at South Alabama. I have South Alabama laying 8. And they're laying 11, so it's 3 points off there. Here's a sneaky good one. Arkansas State at Tulsa. I have Tulsa laying 2. Wouldn't be shocked if it's the other way, and it is. Arkansas State is minus 2, so it's 4 points off there. Cincinnati hosting Alabama A&M. And I have Cincinnati minus 35.5. That's an FCS school. Another FCS school is Delaware State, who's at Western Michigan. I have the Broncos laying 34. Here's an intriguing game to me. Oregon State at Nevada. I have Nevada minus 11.5 against the Beavers. And Nevada is only laying 4. I think that is lunacy of a line. I think they're just overreacting a little bit to them actually putting up some points in Columbus. Middle Tennessee at number 3, Georgia. I have the Bulldogs laying 36.5 to middle. I think that line is high that I picked, and it is. Georgia's only laying 31.5. So I was only 5 off there. Mississippi State I have laying 28 to the Ragin' Cajuns. And they're laying 31.5. So I was 3.5 points off on that line. UL Monroe at Texas A&M is interesting. I have the Aggies laying 22 to UL Monroe, and the Aggies are laying 26, so I was 4 points off on that line. Missouri at Purdue. This is an interesting game. I have this as a pick'em because I couldn't decide as a favorite. Missouri's laying 7. I think that's a little crazy, but hey, maybe that will prove to be a good line. Marshall at South Carolina, I have the Gamecocks laying 22, and they're laying 13.5. So I think that's a little low. And I was 8 points off there. 8.5. Northern Iowa to Iowa. No line posted because of an FCS. Opponent in Northern Iowa. I have Iowa minus 30.5. Western Kentucky at Louisville. I have the Cardinals laying 39.5. And the Cardinals are laying 23. So I believe that they're thinking that Louisville is more like the team we saw against Alabama than killing the FCS school. UMass at Florida International. I have FIU minus 9. And FIU is laying 4.5 to UMass. I think that's a little low, to say the least. That was 4.5 points off, too. Akron at Northwestern, I have the Wildcats laying 18. And the Wildcats are laying 21, so I was 2.5 points off there. Ohio State against TCU. Number 4 against number 15. I have the Buckeyes laying 7 to TCU in Arlington. And Ohio State is laying 12. I think that's high, especially where TCU has a little bit of a home field advantage at Cowboy Stadium. I think that is a weird line. Number 22 ranked USC at Texas. This was a hard line to pick, too. I have the Longhorns laying 1 against the Trojans. And Texas is laying 3.5. Which I can see why. They're the home team and USC didn't look good against Stanford. So I could see why that. New Mexico at New Mexico State, I have the Lobos laying 2 on the road. And the Lobos are laying 5.5. So I was 3.5 off there. Eastern Washington's an FCS school at Wazoo. I have Wazoo laying 42. Big game in the Pac-12. Washington at Utah. I have the Huskies as 10.5 point favorites at Utah. I think that's a little bit of an overreaction on my part because Utah hasn't looked good offensively, and Utah was playing weaker teams. And Washington, on the flip side, destroyed an FCS team and almost knocked off Auburn in week 1. So I guess that's my overreaction of the line. And Washington's only minus 6. Prairie View at UNLV. Prairie View is an FCS team. UNLV I had minus 39. My favorite game on the slate, perhaps, 23 ranked Arizona State at San Diego State. Zona State I have laying 5.5. And they're laying 4.5. So I was a point off there. And it's funny because if you asked me before the season if Arizona State would be favored in this game, I would have said no. Fresno State at UCLA, I actually have Fresno as a 1.5 favorite. And Fresno is a 1 point favorite. I was a 0.5 point off. And last but not least, Southern Utah at Arizona. Southern Utah is an FCS team. I have Arizona minus 47 there. And that's it for the podcast. I know it was a long one. I'll be back tomorrow recapping all the baseball, Monday Night Football. I'll do my NFL Guess the Lines, NFL Power Rankings. And I'll talk about anything else that goes on in the world of sports. I hope you guys have a great day, everybody.